morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Global Impact, the podcast and podcast that connects the dots so you don't have to. I'm Melissa Ritchie, co-host.
How are you, Michael?
I'm very good, thank you.
Yes.
I'm here on Vancouver Island. Where are you?
I am in LA. Just came back.
Where'd you come back from?
San Francisco. I was not that far, but still. It's exciting. Every time I travel, I'm like, yay.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Have any fun there? Discover anything new?
Well, I mean, now that we have the vaccine pass, we have a semblance of normalcy, I guess. We can go to places and socialize. And I actually went, I did a bit of, so I went there for work, but I had a day off and I went to the museum.
Nice.
I haven't been to a museum for, I don't remember last time I went to a place like that. I went to the De Young Museum. They had a private exhibition, which actually I recommend. It's the private collection of Patrick Kelly. I don't know if people know about Patrick Kelly. He's a Black American fashion designer who got very big in the 80s, I think, with his very provocative fashion and very visionary, actually, because he rubbed people the wrong way. He actually went to Paris with his collection and people were not ready for someone like him back then. But he pushed through. His fashion is very extravagant, very much inspired by his ethnicity. And also he brought a lot of slavery theme in his collections and colors and shapes and everything, which, people were like, ooh, back then it was a big thing. But anyhow, and what about yourself? Tell me. What have you done?
It's gray and overcast here on Vancouver Island, but in more ways than one. It's not raining right now, but it looks like it might. But we just had 2 days of torrential rains. We got in many parts of British Columbia more rain in 48 hours than the entire month of November, which is usually our wettest month. So a lot of British Columbia, southern British Columbia is very flat, agricultural. Farmers, I so much feel for them. They just got inundated and animals drowning and stuff like that. And don't forget, a few months ago, we had record high temperatures, never seen before, and wildfires. So it's the double burden now of wildfires on a lot of, farmer properties and homeowners, and then these floods. And, it got a lot of people thinking again about climate change. We just ended that COP conference in Scotland, where everyone said we're on the precipice of disaster, of irreversible catastrophe. And people here were really reminded of that the past few days, because again, wildfires, unprecedented wildfires and heat in the summertime, and now this. Okay, so it's no exaggeration to say that our guest, Sage Gallen, has overcome unimaginable heartbreak, pain, trials, tribulations, testing of his soul almost that he didn't see coming. But I gotta say, this is someone who, when good fortune did knock at his door, he ran with it. He really took advantage with it, did not disappoint humanity. And he's got a lot of credits to his name, as one would expect. Sage was named in NBC's Grio as one of the 40 Black artists to watch in 2014. And when he did take to painting, he took to it like wildfire, producing over 400 paintings in both acrylic and watercolor, and several controversial photography projects documenting the provocative, dark, and raw experiences that he saw.
Yes. And despite his relatively quiet and good upbringing, I mean, nothing could have predicted that he would have gone through this dark journey, and fall into hell and back. He was homeless drug addict for 10 years, survived on scraps from garbage cans. Yeah, he was that person you would see, who would go to garbage can and pick up scraps, food to survive. Everybody went through that experience. So it's a very potent image. And our guest went through this. And he also worked briefly as a prostitute in Times Square. So it's going to be a dark one, but very inspiring at the same time. He bounced back, and now he's here with us, stronger than ever. We cannot wait. We cannot wait to introduce, our guest, this incredible human being, Sage Gallon. Hi.
Hello, guys. How are you?
Hello.
There he is.
How is life in New York?
Is alive. It's busy. It's beautiful. It's been great so far.
So, oh my God, I'm so happy you actually said yes, to come on the show.
Oh my God, I was so honored. I'm terribly honored to be here with you. Thank you so much for asking me. I'm so happy to be here.
Come to your leaving party on Sunday.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't make it, and so I mean, Kent Speakman, Kent, he's a very good friend of mine, and he mentioned you, and so I wanted also to show you something.
Ta-da!
Got it. Okay, this is this. Oh. Here we go.
This so is beautiful. Wow, that's so beautiful. I'm so happy. Kent, it's gorgeous. I'm happy you like it. I really am happy that you like it.
I was so emotional when Kent gave it to me. I was. Those are my colors, first of all. Just happened that it was my colors, and it's painting of love. And I think we need more love right now.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much, Sage. And that's
You're so welcome.
Say thank you to you to bring you on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's
You're
really
so
great
welcome.
to meet you. Melissa said so much about you, and then I started listening to your interviews on various podcasts and reading some of your interviews, and we were just before we came on with you looking at your photography, your really, really moving photography, the crack addict in the hotel room, and so, yeah. So we would love to talk a little bit about that as well.
Absolutely, I'm completely open. Whatever you want to talk about.
Okay.
Melissa, I just want to say very quickly before we start, Kent is my brother and our mother now, because I've adopted his mother, Kathy. She'll confirm that he and I are brothers. And Kent, he touched me so deeply when he was going through the work to select that piece for you. He was very, very meticulous, and it was such a beautiful moment to watch Kent go through the work and select that for you, because I think he has such admiration and love for you that he wanted it to be the perfect piece, and I'm happy that you like it. So
oh, thank you. I'm very touched. Well, it's a good way to say thank you to you and Kent. It's a great opportunity. And yes, and I just I went through your life, your everything. I researched everything about you, and I was actually in San Francisco. I was in Golden Gate Park watching street artists, painters. And the show is usually, I don't know if you know anything about global impact, but we tend to invite people, experts, political people, doctors, etc. But we've never had artists.
Wow.
You are our first one.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you.
First one.
No pressure. No pressure.
Well, you're gonna be doing great, trust me. I mean, we were waiting for a guest like you, so
yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, and so okay, so welcome. Let's get back into it. So welcome to Global Impact, Sage. So we're gonna start as usual. We tend to actually talk about childhood first, and slowly we'll just unveil everything. So Sage, where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in New York, in Long Island, a small town in Suffolk County called Wyandanch. And my parents were children. My dad had just turned 18. My mother was still 17. They were unmarried when they conceived me. And when I was born, my dad was shipped off to Vietnam. My mother had gotten into some issues with substances, and she was sent to a commune in Northern California, a place called Synanon in Tamales Bay. So the beginning of my life was spent being raised really by my grandmothers, my paternal and maternal grandmothers in Wyandanch. When I was 4 years old and my dad had come back from Vietnam, and like many other men, young men, boys of his era, he came back with some, they didn't even call it PTSD at the time. They didn't have a name. I don't believe they had a name for it. But my dad came back differently, different from when he had left, and he wanted to get custody. And so they sent me off to the commune to live with my mother.
Right.
Um,
And how was that for you, being in that commune? How was your upbringing?
the upbringing was spectacular. Is what I remember. I was raised by 500 people of every walk of life. So I grew up in my formative years, in this beautiful environment with a family of 500 people. I knew who my mother was in relationship to me, but she wasn't my primary caretaker. Um, but I grew up in a world where there wasn't racism, there wasn't misogyny, there wasn't um, the vulgarities of human nature and I was completely unaware of those things until moving back to New York when I was 9 years old in 1979. So I grew up in my formative years with this bohemianish kind of reality. It was euphoric for me. It was euphoric. But then we came back to New York.
In the commune, did you have different races, white, black,
Oh
mixed?
yeah, everything.
Yeah, everybody was mixed.
Whatever walk of life, from gay, straight, black, white, male, female, what the whole um, melting pot of humanity I was raised by. So like I was taught that we were all a family. Like I said, I knew nothing about racism. Right. I knew nothing about misogyny or what a woman is supposed to do this or a woman is supposed to do that. The women worked alongside the men worked alongside the women. And, so I never, my foundation of who I am is seeped in that reality, that experience, and understanding that, we're all intrinsically connected and we're all more alike than we are separate.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Michael, do you have
Sure. So and in that kind of environment, you had a lot of influences, no doubt. Was there any inkling back then of what you wanted to become professionally or as an adult, what you wanted to do career-wise?
Then no, actually. I was so busy being a kid that there was no future. There was, as children, which makes I think makes childhood so special, is that there's only the immediate now. So I never really thought about my future in that context. That came a little bit later, actually. When we moved back to New York in 1979, and at that time, Synanon, the commune I grew up in, Synanon, had changed tremendously. And when we left, it was interesting because, like I said, my mother was my mother, but she wasn't my primary caretaker. And she and her then husband decided they were leaving. And my initial reaction was like, okay, make sure you write. I'll see you guys later. Have a great life. I'll be here with my family, and you guys have fun. And they were like, no, you're coming with. And I was like, or like, what do you mean? And then being reintroduced to New York City, we lived in Harlem briefly, and it was 1979, and that Shangri-La reality that I had experienced growing up was ripped away from me. No, and certainly did not exist in New York the way I had grown up.
Because Harlem was a really rough place back then. Right? Nothing
Harlem
like it is
was
now.
Exactly. And we lived in Harlem. I think we moved to 158th Street.
Wow.
And my mother, they put me in a Catholic school, and I had no idea what was going on psychologically. It was just a traumatic experience leaving Synanon, but then being immersed into an environment that was so alien to me. And we stayed in Harlem for 6 months, and then we moved to Hempstead, Long Island, where I was raised and grew up. And that's, I think, where the whole idea of art came into really my life.
How old were you when you moved to Long Island?
Hempstead, about 10 years old.
10 years.
Actually, yeah. So 79, 80. So I was just turning 10. And, because of all of the trauma and all of the stuff that was going on, that was the first time I tried to commit suicide, actually, was when I was 10. I tried to belt to the door and try to hang myself. And luckily it didn't work. It was just so much. And, my mother was going through some stuff, and my stepfather was a very violent man. I remember then that's where I found art. Art was, in many ways, and still is to this very day, my salvation. To be able to lose oneself in for hours at a time in a drawing or a paint. Oh, I didn't paint, but in a drawing or in music. Between drawing and Donna Summer, the only thing, those are the two things that saved my life.
You wanted to marry Donna Summer.
I was gonna be her husband. You have no idea. I had it all planned.
What's the matter with her not taking you?
I don't know. That's what I'm saying.
I was in love with her too. I was about the same age. I was like, oh my goodness.
I actually later in my years, shortly before, right before she died, actually, I got a chance to meet her.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like, I've never been a starstruck person, and it wasn't even being starstruck. It was just the appreciation of how her voice and her music really got me through some very difficult times. And it was interesting for me because it made me realize how impactful art is to other people's lives. And, without even, knowing it, it was just really fascinating. But yeah, so that's when I grew up in Hempstead. I grew up in Hempstead from 80 to the time I left when I went to school.
Music and lyrics must really affect you, because I was listening this morning to your incredible story of how you were in Manhattan, I guess a little bit older, and you saw a Mack truck barreling down the street and you were inching towards it, thinking, I can't, I guess, take it anymore. And then you heard a song. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Because both of my parents were into drugs, I was a very square kid and very animate about never using drugs. But then I got introduced to cocaine, which quickly led to crack cocaine.
Yeah.
And within a year's time, it was June 17th, 1991. And by June 17th, 1992, I was a homeless drug addict. I had picked out of garbage cans to eat, prostitution. Just my life was crazy, and I was done.
Who did introduce you to drugs? Do you remember that moment when you first had?
Yeah, two guys I met on the train. I don't want to say their names. One's, we'll say D and J. They lived about one stop away from my house, and they had this beautiful 3-bedroom apartment. This is June 17th. It was a Saturday. I was leaving my acting class on Lafayette, and got on the 4 train to go home, and we struck up a conversation. They invited me over to their home. I was doing a lot of cocaine at the time, powder cocaine. And so they invite me to their home. It's a beautiful, like I said, 3-bedroom apartment, and they have this black leather sofa, this black and white checkered rug, black and white china, a big screen TV, and they sit me down in the living room, and they kind of disappeared. And although I was doing a lot of cocaine, I still had a good upbringing, and so it would be rude just to pull out a vial of cocaine and start sniffing without so I wanted to see where the bathroom was so I could do it privately. And as I'm walking down the hallway, they're standing in the doorway of one of their bedrooms, and they have this aspirin bottle with aluminum foil, ashes on the aluminum foil, and a pen sticking out the side. And I remember this as if it were today, like if it were happening now. It was one of the most vivid memories of my life. And I say, what are you guys doing? They were like, we're getting high. Do you get high? And I'm like, yeah, I got some coke. They said, do you want to try this? My exact words to them were, as long as it's not crack, I'll try anything. Their response to me was, crack? Oh my God, no. Do we look like crackheads? They had leather furniture and matching china. I mean, no. I mean, my perception of a crackhead was that dirty, nasty, smelly person on the street. Ironically, the person I would become a year to the date after this experience, after this introduction. And yeah, that's how that started. And I guess coming from addiction or parents who were had addiction issues, I was predisposed to addiction. I would never, I didn't expect the rapidity of it, how quickly I was on the street, how quickly my life had descended. So I'm homeless in New York City. I'm living on 8th Avenue, the streets. I typically didn't go further south than Penn Station, typically didn't go further north than 50th Street. And it's early in the morning, and I always tell the story the same way because it's just such so seared in my memory. But it's the whisper of New York, not the yell or the moan or the scream of New York yet. It's too early for that. It's the whisper of New York, and the storefronts behind me are starting to open, and the traffic is moving at a rapid pace because there's no traffic at that time. And I was just done. I was done. I was in so much pain. I didn't have any more drugs. I didn't have any money. And I had done the things I'd done to sustain my addiction at that time weighed so heavily on me, and I didn't have that out to get away mentally, spiritually. And I'm standing. It's like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, I guess. And there's a storefront opening behind me, and they have the radio on, and I could hear it. I'm just not listening to them. I hear it. I'm aware of it, but I'm not listening. I'm looking down the street. I'm looking down 8th, and there's this Mack truck down the street, and it's going at a rapid pace. And I'm like, this is it. I won't even feel anything. And I tried to commit suicide numerous times before, but I was figuring that this one would be a winner, and I'd be done, and it'll be over, and I wouldn't feel that pain anymore. And the noise is getting a little bit louder. The truck is coming faster. The wrought iron gate behind me opens, and the music comes out stronger, and I hear this melody. Da, 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 da. And the truck is coming faster, and I'm inching closer to the curb because I don't want anyone to grab me. I don't want anyone to save me because I'm already done. I just want it over. And the truck is coming, and the music behind me is I'm starting to hear it now. And then I heard this voice. There used to be a grain tower alone, and it was Seal singing Kiss from a Rose, and this is when that song had just come out. And God, it always gets to me, this moment of my life, because it was as though this man had reached into my heart and hugged all of the pain, didn't eliminate it, didn't get rid of it, but understood it in his song and in his voice. And I just stood there, started just like bawling like a child, like a baby. And just the song, his voice, that music just enveloped me. And when I finally was able to wipe the tears from my eyes, that truck had passed. That moment had passed. The pain had subsided briefly. just briefly enough for me not to try to jump in front of another truck. And I stood there, and that song just resonated with me. And when I moved to Los Angeles, March 7th, 1994, I think, 97. I just moved back to New York. I was there, I think it was 97. I was at a party where I got to meet Seal and tell him that story.
Wow.
And again, music, lyrics, art, film, all of it, it does have a power to transform, to save, to elevate, to heal. And that was that one.
Sage, thanks for telling us that story. And you said something that really grabbed me, connected to that story. You said that when you're homeless, you're unaware of your own stench, and I was unaware of my own pain. What did you mean by that? It's such a gripping kind of thought there.
Well, like I said, I grew up as a square kid. I was literally, my mother, whom I miss and I love, she was a hellfire. We were poor growing up.
Mm-hmm.
We were poor, but I never knew that. So I grew up kind of like a Cosby kid. She made sure I had everything and anything I could have possibly imagined. So I had this I had a prejudice against poor people, even though I was poor. Homelessness was, how ill. Like I would stick my nose up to you and cross the street.
Sage, did you feel like you were under pressure to fit in? When you were like in New York and you were at this very big school, which was, what school was that again?
Oh, where I grew up, Hempstead High School.
No, after.
FIT, to FIT?
Yes.
Yeah.
And people are a bit rich,
mm-hmm.
It's the rich crowd, the artsy
kind. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you feel pressure to fit in?
No, I mean, what kind of broke that fall was that I was a bohemian Black kid from a commune living in a middle class, working class Black community growing up. I was always weird. And once I embraced my weirdness, I was like, fine, I was good. Like, yeah. I'm just going to be different because I'm not going to try. And, fitting in always bored me. It was not my thing. But I never felt that type of pressure.
So the drug was not something that you wanted. You got exposed to and did it because you wanted to fit in. You just did it because it was already something familiar for you.
But I think just being an artist, there's one of the things I think many of artists don't have is that stop button. It's like, oh, what's that? We'll try that. You want to feel or experience everything, and then you add that with the fact that I'm probably predisposed to addiction. That it really just the descent was fabulous, but it wasn't to fit in. It wasn't to get friends or be popular or anything to that nature. It was just a matter of like, I've never tried this before. Let me try this. Kind of thing, and
of experiencing life and opening up the gate of creativity.
Exactly.
I mean, a lot of artists do substance, to actually get inspired. They smoke pot and everything. What's your take on that today? I mean, what do you feel? What's your take on artists doing drugs to become better artists?
I don't know if that would be the reason. I think that, I think everything is energy and frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And I think whatever God is, I'm not a religious person, I'm a very spiritual person, but I'm not a religious person. I read all of the texts and scriptures and studied various religions, but my conclusion is God is a creator. The mother divine, the universe is a creator. So in this manifestation, I am an artist. So if we're vibrating on frequency and energy, artists are in a weird position closer to that ascension. And not closer or better, not better or worse than, but artists vibrate at a different energy. Empaths, clairvoyance, artists are on a different frequency, I think, than a lot of people. However, we live in a construct that is kind of antithetical to our most authentic nature, our truest selves. And so to navigate between those two elements, those two worlds, you'll have a lot of friction. And I think most artists are, a lot of artists are self-destructive or addicts in some form of fashion, or, you know, suicidal, or because one, as an empath, which you are as an artist, you're absorbing and feeling everything, everything.
Yeah.
And then to try to navigate on the construct and the reality of who you are, and that friction that ensues between those two worlds, it causes great distress on the spirit, the mind. And like you know, like I said, you know, I found art because after my first failed suicide attempt. You know, it comes out of a place of desperation or necessity. And I think that's where a lot of artists tend to be, and even, you know, the popular ones, you know, the ones who become successful or famous or rich or powerful, you know, if they're still artists, there's going to be that paradox that one lives in of, I think, especially if you become a rich, successful, famous artist, then that to me is like it magnifies that paradox.
Right. And you live in a heightened reality anyway. I mean, everything is so heightened, available as you become richer and more successful.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, drugs, it's on a platter.
Yeah.
You are just offered things. And as you said, I mean, it's this need to constantly reach for something more, to open the gates of more. As an artist, we are seeker of truth and life. And sometimes, unfortunately, we take it too far, you know, and it hurts us. And drugs, or if you take like artists who do method acting, you know, talking about actors, go down into that dark hole and cannot get out of it, you know. I mean, we had the actor from Dark Knight who played
Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
Marlon Brando. I mean, the list is endless. You know, just where the artists, and when I say artists, I regard everyone to be an artist in some form of fashion. But the creative visual artists, I think, are a little bit different in that regards, in that, you know, you're always inundated by inspiration. You're always inundated by emotion and feeling. So yeah, it's fascinating. But we all have that. The series, Michael, that you referred to earlier, the Cracks series, I titled it Cracks with an apostrophe over the S at the end. Because we all have something. We all have, it could be shopping, it could be washing your hands compulsively, it could be drinking, it could be strip clubs, it could be whatever it is. It could be, you know, cutting out coupons for the Piggly Wiggly, whatever it is, we all have that thing. The thing that we can't necessarily control. I don't know if it's dark or light, but I know that there's something that we all share a commonality on many regards. But we all have our crack. We all have that one thing, at least that one thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Do you, in your, your work is so expressive, whether it's the photography, the paintings, so deep. Do you think in your particular case also, it was a bit of a salvation for you because you weren't holding these deep feelings, perhaps the anger or the anxiety inside of you, but you're sharing it with the whole world. And that must have helped quite a bit, yes?
It does, and it put my experiences in a very interesting perspective. If I hadn't been homeless, I couldn't shoot my homeless series, Matthews 2540. and or the Crack series, or the Queens and Kings series, where I got to spend a year on the streets in Hollywood with these homeless transgender kids. If A, B, and C did not occur in my personal life, then I would not have had the opportunity, the wherewithal, or the foresight to see the humanity in various stations. If I were, say, a normal person, I wouldn't be able to paint what I paint. I say this often, we're all brought here with promise and with purpose. And although my life is mine uniquely, it is not mine exclusively. So I've been given a patchwork of swatches to stitch together to create this life, or this garment of life. And if I didn't have that piece of material, then I would have a hole where it was supposed to be, where it belonged. So I think that one informs the other. My life, my history, my experience gave me an opportunity to be receptive to the lives of other people in a way which it wouldn't have been the same had I not gone through that. So it was my salvation. Yes, art was my salvation, but my life was my education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And
actually, I'm going to quote you here because you said something that really was poignant and moved me a lot. You said, being homeless is being invisible. It's being despised. It's being rejected. It hurts.
Yeah.
The pain that got you in that space is magnified by the pain inflicted by others while you're in that space. One can easily slip deeper into the abyss and lose their mind. There's nothing colder than being invisible, inhuman.
I said that?
You said that.
Wow.
Very eloquent.
I'm so intelligent. That was me.
Once upon a time, say that, yes. And you know what? When I was reading this, it's fascinating because that came from a very specific experience, homelessness. But this is very relatable to many people right now who are, after those past 2 years with COVID and everything.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel like that. When I was reading it, it hit me.
Yeah.
And it's a very, as you said, pain is not exclusive to oneself. It's, we're all sharing it together collectively.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about how, can we go into details? When you were homeless, how emotionally on the feeling level did you feel? How was your journey, your thought process, everything?
It's interesting. Because I've been thinking, and this is a fascinating question for me right now. I've been thinking a lot about that lately, actually. I know that it started off, through the drugs, and oh well, I'm not homeless because I have an apartment. I have somewhere to go, and then I lost the apartment, but I kept the keys, so I would always carry a set of keys with me. And in the beginning, I think it was more, oh, this is an adventure, and then it became real.
Right.
And you asked something earlier about the stench. Like, I didn't realize that I had smelled until once I got onto a bus, and because I convinced myself that I didn't look that bad. Now, mind you, at that time, my natural body weight was 175 pounds. I reached 130 pounds, 135 pounds. I reeked because I hadn't showered or bathed, and I didn't realize it. So my brain created a whole illusion that enabled me to Exactly. And then what happened is reality hit you. And so, especially in New York, where you're inundated with 8 million people who are literally walking through you because you don't matter, you don't exist.
Yeah.
The conflict with me in that regards was I was messed up, but I was still a good person. Like I never, you know, hit an old woman over her head to steal her pocketbook. I never I still had a good heart, a good foundation. And what I understood then, and like I said, growing up as a Cosby kid in this community in the 80s, and being a person who stuck my nose up to a homeless person, and then being the very thing I despised myself, now being despised by others, and understanding that I would sit in doorways for hours, and people would walk past or walk through you, and you're like thinking to yourself, or they would diminish you, or people would diminish you and dehumanize you, and you're saying to yourself, you're a paycheck, you're a disease, you're a sickness away from where I am. And that to me was one of the greatest lessons of my life in terms of how human we are, how intrinsically connected we are, and how fragile, how vulnerable we are.
You said something so relevant for these times just now, because of COVID and the unprecedented disruption that it brought. And even before COVID, a lot of people would say, yeah, in America, people are a paycheck or a sickness away from bankruptcy or homelessness. What would you say, Sage, to the millions who are going through a lot of anxiety right now, a lot of disruption, who perhaps have even lost the roof over their head for the first time in their lives at their jobs, how to cope? And I ask you that because you've fallen, you've got up, you've fallen, you got up. And I think you had a lot of friends to intervene on your behalf too. But what would be your advice to now? I know it's maybe difficult to say to such a wide audience, but for those who are listening out there who are on the edge right now, any words there?
What I find most helpful for me in being there now, moving from LA to New York, and the whole transition of that, what I what I find most helpful for me, and especially in my times of fear or worry or anxiety, when I feel my energy getting to that level, I try to see what could I do for someone else?
Yeah.
How could I help someone else? Not that to post, giving a homeless person a plate of food on Thanksgiving and posting it on Instagram to get likes or anything. But what could I do to sincerely and genuinely help? And it doesn't have to be a homeless person. It could be a woman with a stroller going down the subway station. It could be, okay, so I'm going to out myself. I've been feeling that anxiety the last couple of weeks, especially getting back to New York. And I was having lunch a few weeks ago with a dear friend of mine, an amazing designer named Epperson, and we were the upper East Side, and we're finishing our lunch, and there's this man who's walking down the street, disheveled, middle-aged, homeless man. He has no shoes on, nor does he have any socks on. So my friend Epperson goes into the restroom, and I stop this man on the street, and I say, "You don't have any shoes." And he asked me for a cigarette. I gave him a cigarette. I said, and by the time Epperson's coming out of the restaurant, there's like a Dwayne Reed across the street. I asked my friend Epperson, please keep this man company. Please don't let him leave. I don't have any money to buy a pair of shoes, but I certainly have $10 to buy a pair of socks.
Yeah.
Or a package of socks. And so I run across the street, and I don't know what's happening or why I'm doing it. I know why I'm doing this. but I don't know how this is going to happen. And I come back and I give the man 2 pairs of socks to put on his feet. I'm like, he asked me for another cigarette. I give it to him. And I said, please just put the socks on now for me, just to make me feel better. By the time I got to the 2 train, that whole pack of socks was gone. So now one of the things what I'm trying to teach myself or make a habit now is never to leave my house without a pair of socks in my pocket.
Yeah.
So for me is always when my chi is unaligned, when my energy is volatile, I have to think, how could I help someone else? And that always helps me.
And don't be afraid to ask for help as well, right?
Exactly. I have, my closest friends, John Vines and David Zelina, and, I have those people whom I trust implicitly who, could look at me like, what's going on? And that's an important element too, is, a part of being altruistic is being able to accept, I need help. I need to talk, and being willing and strong enough to articulate that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are hoping, if there's anything that good came out of COVID and the lockdowns, is that people are more inclined now to ask for help. There's less stigma to go out and say, look, I need help, or I'm suffering from this or that. So hopefully we'll come out of this on the better end in that regard.
Yeah. I hope so. It was interesting, this pandemic, and I think it was in many regards, as tragic as it was in many regards, it was a blessing. It showed the entire world, how the human imprint is enormous, how fragile things are, and what ways to find your happy. I lost my job in LA, and I worked in a restaurant. I loved the restaurant. I loved the owners. It's called AOC. I loved what I did. I really enjoyed it. But when the restaurant closed down, it was a higher end restaurant. So the places I worked at, I never was really affected by external economic stuff. And when this happened, it was like, oh, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? But I remember the day Caroline and Suzanne had to tell us that they were closing down. And I remember saying to myself, okay, Sage, this is going to be either the best or the worst time of your life, but only you can decide. And I got to travel and go see people I love and surround myself with my friends and my family. And I got to go on this great pursuit to find my happy, the things that make me happy, the places, the people that make me happy. YouTube, bravo. I learned how to cook new stuff.
I remember that period when people were cooking, what was that, banana bread?
Exactly.
Bread? Was funny. There was no flour in the shops.
There's no flour.
Oh my God. Everybody wanted to bake. That was
to learn. And to keep that going, though, to keep that sense of exploration going, to realize that, the beginning of COVID, within the first 3 months, you had turtles nesting in the beaches of Venice, dolphins swimming in the Isles of Venice. You had the freshest air in 70 years. You had plantain in Argentina illuminating the waves that you hadn't seen in 7 years. You had all of this stuff happen. And, the idea is this: it doesn't take a pandemic to make you think about how connected we are. It shouldn't take another tragedy that will have people, fighting in grocery stores for a roll of toilet paper. That sense of awareness now. Was that insane? That was insane.
Insane.